Hey, what's going on? I'm Alex Southey, and you are listening to another episode of Your Worst Song. I was watching the Titan Submersible Netflix documentary that just came out, and what a shit show that was. Moving on, I had Shawn Clarke on the podcast. Been trying to have him on for a while. Classic, my fault, scheduling things. But he was an incredibly thoughtful person, a thoughtful musician. He talks a lot about how he came to music, how first he was, of all things, just a vocalist. And we say just a vocalist to mean solely a vocalist, not to make it seem as though being a vocalist is somehow less than, just to be clear. I just didn't expect it maybe from somebody who doesn't, he seems confident, but he doesn't seem like an extrovert. That's somebody who really likes the endings of shows. And that led us down a bunch of philosophical rabbit holes. But this podcast is for music-related philosophical rabbit holes, I've decided. We talked about the fact that he's kind of switched genres. Back in the day when he was starting out, it was a little more somewhere between classic rock and indie rock, then indie rock based on the fact that he was the singer but not the songwriter or lyricist in some cases. So he was at the mercy of what he was working on. And more recently, in his Shawn Clarke career, including, he talks about this album quite a bit, this album that he released called William, it being sort of the first foray into indie folk, but it made the most sense to him kind of immediately based on what he likes to play and where his skill set is. There's a lot to love in this one. Enjoy. Recommend the podcast to friends. I'm Alex Southey, and you are listening to Your Worst Song.
How about it? Well, got up around 7 because that's when our cat gets us up. Because he wants wet food in the morning. So he does this really great thing where he goes to the bathroom, which I think is kind of like the middle of our house, and he just starts making this like yelping sound. Yeah. And he won't stop until you get up and feed him. So that's always fun. And then I kind of like hung out, had breakfast with my partner, and then I spent some time just writing reviews on Letterboxd for movies I watched and hadn't reviewed yet. Nice. That's awesome. So it was a pretty good morning. That
sounds like a great morning. I'm going through almost the identical thing with my cat, who's just off camera there. But yep, I wake up and she's sort of like looking over me expectantly, wondering why I haven't already fed her.
Right.
She runs the household for sure. How long have you had your cat?
I guess just over 2 years.
Nice. So still relatively new.
Mm-hmm. And he's a senior cat. We got him when he was about 10, I guess. So. Yeah, he's pretty great.
Lovely. That's lovely. And let's talk a bit about Letterboxd. When did you get into Letterboxd? Because I was a bit of a late adapter to it, I think.
I guess in the pandemic.
Okay.
It was and I watched so many movies during the pandemic because I was at home the whole time. Yeah. And like there are some days that I watched like 5 movies in a day.
and typing actual reviews makes you feel like you're somewhat productive.
Yeah, I like to believe that it helps my writing skills. I'm not sure it actually does, but
at least maybe your critical thinking skills or like evaluating things. I feel the same way, and for people who don't know, Letterboxd is like a movie version of Goodreads. If anyone's familiar with that, it's basically a more niche form of social media based around, in this case, the movies that you've watched and the reviews, and then you can add friends, see what they've watched, see on their like to watch list what they want to see, stuff like that. So it's good. Yeah, it's fun.
And it's I really like that there's the stats part
of it.
So
oh my god.
I spend like I'll watch a few movies and I'll go to my stats and see like how it affected my it's kind of silly, but it's one of those like things that don't mean anything that brings me a lot of joy.
Oh, absolutely. They were so smart to introduce that. It's a little bit like how Spotify does the end of year thing, and you see, this is the band I listen to the most. Yeah. This is the blah blah blah. Letterboxd does a similar thing, but they'll break it down by like, based on your viewing habits, your favorite director is such and such, and your favorite genre is this. So it's funny to see you like see how it incrementally changes. That
Yeah.
would be fun. Is there anything you watched recently that you thought was really good?
We watched Picnic at Hanging Rock a couple nights ago, which is an Australian film from the 70s. Peter Weir film. I'd seen it once many years ago, but rewatched it. It's really great, kind of like dreamlike mystery, sort of, without much resolution. A little bit of a
classic 70s movie.
Yeah, totally. And very Australian in the 70s, like Australian films in like the 70s, and they kind of have this Europeans versus Australian nature kind of thing. This thing going on where, like, you know, Europeans are inadequate to deal with the nature in Australia, which I think
so
is
they're
fair.
all like lessons learned by foolish Europeans coming to Australia.
There's a lot of that. Yeah,
got it. That would be fun to watch. I see why that probably does well in Australia, or did well. That sounds like the kind of thing that would be on like Criterion Collection.
Yes.
How did you watch it? That's what it was.
Exactly.
There you
I
go.
watched it on Criterion Channel. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. This is all making sense. You're on Letterboxd. You have a Criterion. Okay. I understand. So,
and then in the morning I try to find a Roger Ebert review of a movie, if I can. Anything before 2013.
You keep drawing me to movies. This is a music podcast, but I could literally just talk about this the entire time.
Same.
Well, let's end off on that part then. What about Roger Ebert? Like, what's a classic? What review did you read recently? What's one that stuck out?
Well, we read. So this is kind of a thing we do every morning with breakfast. Is like we'll read Roger Ebert's review of whatever movie we watched the night before.
Yeah.
But we've watched like maybe 3 movies and hadn't had breakfast together, so we kind of read 3.
That's
reviews. Fun. I don't know any particular reviews, but his great movies review. So like he has a section called Great Movies.
Yes.
And that was kind of a big thing in my development as a movie watcher. Like I would, that's how I got into films. Like I would just look at his reviews and look at his great movies list and be like, okay, I should watch these movies. It was a great way to kind of like set up a base for my movie enjoyability. I can't use good words today.
No, I get it completely. And did you watch Siskel and Ebert like at the movies and stuff like that?
A little bit, yeah.
Cool.
I used to like watching it back in the day, for sure.
That's awesome. The irony is now, I was just about to say, I wish that still existed, but the irony is it exists in a million forms on YouTube. I'm just not watching them.
But
that was pretty cool.
It was, and I think there's something to be said for, like, you know, experts. I know movie criticism gets a bit of, any sort of criticism gets a rough go, but I think there should be room for people who really understand an art to talk about art, and I'd rather watch like someone who I know knows movies like Roger Ebert, even though he's long passed,
yes,
than like some bro podcast.
I completely agree with you. I think that we've gotten to a point, but this is well, whatever. We've gotten to a point where in society where I feel like the fact that social media is for everyone and everyone has a voice, that saying it that way sounds really good, but then it's almost like we've gotten to the point where we're treating each voice equally, even when there are like objective academic things that you could learn that set you apart from, say, in this case, the average movie watcher. If you go to film school, if you go to a journalism school and you work in the industry or something like that, you're gonna be more informed in a way that allows you to, for example, review movies. So I'm with you there. It would be nice that go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say, like, you know, as a last, it's like, and it's okay to disagree with these people. Like, there's Roger Ebert reviews that I disagree with, but his arguments, I think, for or against a movie, I think are usually really valid.
Exactly.
And I can read and be like, well, maybe he misread this, or like, I agree with what you're saying, but I disagree because of this. This is what makes the film good, in my opinion. You know. Like,
he was not always right. He was not always right. No.
But he was not always right, but he really had a good explanation for something. You just sometimes disagree with it. Yeah.
For sure. And anyway, people unfamiliar with him, go read his reviews. I think he lived until 2012? 2013. So you can pretty much find reviews for most of modern cinema. They're all really back to like the 60s.
Yeah, back to late 60s.
It's pretty cool. Anyway,
what are we talking about here today?
Maybe this is a way in, though. Maybe this is a way in. Like, you're so passionate about film, clearly. and you're sipping from a CBC mug and everything, why not go more directly that vein, or did you at a certain point? And then, like, why music, why not film, based on the beginning of this conversation?
There was, I definitely made a conscious choice at one point what I'd pursue, like, and I think because I was really interested in movies and music, and then at one point I'd be like, okay, listen, Shawn's brain, like, I have to focus on something.
Yeah.
I can't. And ultimately, like, music is something you could do pretty easily at home or by yourself or, without a lot of money.
Yeah. The barrier for entry is lower than ever.
Exactly. And I think that was the big thing.
Yeah. Okay, so it was as simple as that. It was like a very realistic look at, you liked both of these artistic pursuits, but one would be kind of, it's more achievable in the short term and the long term because it costs less money, you can do it at home, etc. If you get into film, there's a whole bunch of crap you need to do to even get a film out there. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, out of curiosity, what would you have done if you'd gone into film? Do you like directing? Do you like screenwriting? What would you want to do?
I think I would have ideally I probably would have liked to have been a director. Whether or not I would have been able to handle that kind of work is totally. But like in this like hypothetical,
yes,
it would have been cool to like try to make a movie as a director.
For sure. Cool. Well, that makes sense. I mean, we can draw that back to music. Do you ever feel like there's an overarching, when you write an album or when you write an EP or when it's a collection of some sort, do you feel like there's are you someone who likes an overarching theme, or would you rather it be just the selection, the best cut of the last year or two of your songwriting?
I think I don't write a lot. So sometimes there's not a lot of options to choose from, but I like to find a theme within the music before an album comes out, like, or when I'm putting an album together. Sometimes it doesn't feel complete until I've kind of like sat with it a few times and kind of thought like, okay, what is the overarching theme? What are the ideas? And then there's kind of like usually kind of a bit of an aha moment where I'm like, okay, I think there's this and this, and then they put it together in my head. It might not be something that someone listening would get, or if I explained it, they might not get it, but it's almost like I have to make it right in my head first before I can feel comfortable with the product. For
sure, it should make sense to you at the very least, even if it doesn't make sense necessarily to other people because it's coming from the inside of your head. That makes sense. Exactly, it has to be structured to you. Yeah. Well, give me an example of that. Like most recently, I know you're doing Persp, right? So how about this?
Yeah. Well, so my album Softer Scissors came out last year.
Yeah.
And I think my friend actually kind of he listened to it. My friend Mike Kerr, who's a guitarist here in Toronto, really great guitarist and musician, and he played some guitar on the album, and he listened to the album, and he said, the album's kind of like a tape loop. He said it's like there's a lot of themes and ideas that come back, and there's like literal like cassette tape stuff on it, and he gave me a few examples, and I think I kind of unconsciously or subconsciously knew that, but once he said it, I was like, oh, okay, that I can tie that together, and that feels right in my head, and that really connects it in a minor way. There's some other things, but that's the one that really stands out.
For sure. But I see. So it's thematically, it's all related, and you can find the thread, but it's not necessarily like a concept album in the way we think of those with a continuing arc or story or something.
Right. I don't write fast enough to do like a concept album.
Well, that's interesting. Why would you need to write it quickly? That's interesting.
I think. Well, maybe you don't. I
to
guess,
stay within the setting of the world or whatever. Okay.
I guess you'd write a story. I don't know. I've never tried, so maybe I could. But I imagine you just could get a blueprint, like a skeleton of a story, and then I guess you got to write the songs of a story. So I feel like it would work best if you were working all at once.
Yeah, you're probably
as opposed
right.
to spreading over a few years. But
you're probably right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting then. That even though you're bringing songs together from over a longer amount of time, they still will, you discover later, that fall under recurring similar themes? Like, can you look at back at your life and go, oh, now based on my music or based on whatever creative outlets I had at the time, like you can very clearly tell this 5 years of my life, I was really like thinking about this, and it's much clearer in hindsight now than at the time you maybe had no idea that was one of the central things on your mind.
Yeah, I think that does happen sometimes in listening back. I think more so listening back to music reminds me of who I was at the time, just because there's the connection, like because the songs are, are connected. And yeah, every once in a while though, there is a thing where I'll listen to a song and be like, oh, maybe I was actually, it came from this place, like this, this pain or this confusion or something, and I feel like that's always evolving too. I think a lot of the songs on the new album were written during the pandemic, and I think, while I'm conscious of that, there are songs, like I have a song called Tall Trees that I don't think I entirely understand yet. Like, I understand enough of it to know, I wrote it. So, but like, I think sometimes I can listen and be like, okay, maybe this line's actually about this, which is kind of interesting.
So if that's the case, are you sometimes writing lyrics in a way where you're writing around a feeling until you're able to articulate it in a way that makes sense, as opposed to coming to your lyrics and writing out actual formed statements or thoughts that you've had? As in, you're trying to articulate your subconscious, or do you have something right at the fore that you are directly trying to state?
It's hard to say. I think.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think it may be a little more subconscious, but only in a sense that, like, I rarely start with an idea of what a song should be about. It's usually kind of like, my usual process is like, I've got a guitar part, riff or something, or a chord progression, and then a melody usually comes next. And if it's kind of gelling, I like it, the melody kind of turns into syllables and nonsense, and then like maybe a line comes out of that, or two lines or something, and then there's kind of a process of like, well, what are those lines about? And that's maybe when I connect it to my life, where a line can be, I wish I could think of an example right now. It's too early.
No, it's
a line could be, remind me of a story in my life, or could just remind me of a type of story to tell, and then I could try to build on that.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, one sec.
That's okay.
Living with cats, you get random shit in your mouth sometimes.
Very, very true. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I'm curious. Would you? Yeah, I'm very similar in that I don't necessarily start with something that I know I want to write about. You're sort of, like you said, you're like, your creative mind is provoked by something that its interest is piqued based on what you've played on some sort of music, and you're also, it's weird. It's like allowing your subconscious to bubble up via you just making these random sounds that eventually follow the melody that then turn into fully formed words. You're like excavating a bunch of stuff. Yeah, anyway.
It's true.
Well,
it's an interesting process.
It is an interesting process, and I think because it's hard. Well, exactly. I think because it differs all the time and it's hard to express, there's consistent, it's always fertile ground, because you never know where you stand. That's actually helpful, I find.
Yeah. And you're, I'm always me and you're always you.
Yes.
And our brains work in totally different ways, that like whatever I write is going to come out usually just like me.
Yes, good point.
Like it's always going to be me, unless I somehow make a conscious effort to write totally different. I've never done that, but that's a possibility. I think you make good sense. How would Shawn write a song and then do totally the opposite thing?
Yeah, pretend you're typing it in on Chat GPT, and then how would they break that down and then write that? That's funny. That would be a weird concept album idea or prompt. Yeah,
that would be. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you've obviously thought about the songwriting process quite a bit. I want to know how it begins. When do you start writing in earnest?
Definitely. That starts probably just out of high school. During high school, I played in bands, but I was singing. I was just a singer off the bat.
Okay,
And we were
wow. Not holding any instrument. You're just up there with the microphone.
No, I was just up there with the microphone. In high school, I had people I knew who would play guitar in the hallways and stuff, and I didn't play anything, but I wanted to be involved. I liked music, and I would just be like, oh, I can sing that song, and then I'd sing it, and thankfully I could carry a tune a little better than they could, so they invited me to join the bands. And then the first original band I played in high school, there were two guitarists, and they wrote all the songs. And then like I would change the lyrics sometimes, but like not for any logical reason, more just it was very aesthetic, like this word comes out of my mouth a little nicer.
I know what you
kind
mean.
Of stuff.
Yes, but it achieves loosely the same thing or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Or I didn't even, which is kind of rude, but maybe I didn't like think about what they were trying
to say. You're a teenager.
I was a teenager. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm the singer. I can do what I want. And then in college, I went to college for music, but as a saxophone player, and I would play guitar and kind of like to counter the school process, I would say.
Okay.
So I started playing guitar at the end of high school, but just sort of by myself. I'd play and I'd write lyrics, but it was more like stream of consciousness and like aesthetics. Like that was kind of the process for writing lyrics. There wasn't off the top. There wasn't a lot of like stories or like honesty. Really, It was just kind of like because I didn't really understand that part of writing songs. It was easier to like just come up with words like like Beck or something.
Yes,
like, Beck.
Right.
Conscious, and I really liked
good point.
Beck. And I really liked Radiohead, and even though a lot their lyrics do have
they're a lot more organized than Beck, maybe I would say, but
and they are directed at something, but like they're a little they don't always make sense. Even
they like to obscure things. Yes, exactly.
So I think I looked at them the same way as Beck's lyrics. I just thought they were kind of like imagery and like randomness, and
I'm sure that is the case, frankly, with some of their lyrics.
I think so. Yeah.
It's like which it's intersecting. It's like some of it's poetry, some of it's just like word association, and some of it probably really does mean specific things.
Yeah, for sure.
So you take inspiration from them. I can't believe that in high school you were just a singer, as in not holding anything. That is so vulnerable in my mind. When you say, "Hey, I can sing that," I know you maybe were just speaking loosely with your words, but what's that? Is that original songs that you're hearing other kids write, or is it covers that they're trying?
Covers.
Okay, yes. So you're like, oh, I've heard that on the radio and sung along in the car. I'm pretty sure I can do that.
I was a classic rock kid.
Okay.
And like, especially in early high school, I like only listened to like classic rock and like the blues and stuff. And I didn't like listen to a lot of modern music until kind of the end of high school. I started getting more into that. So people would be in the hallway playing like, I don't know, American Woman or something.
Right. And so therefore you could sing along to it.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's an easy song to sing. I'll just do that,
Yeah. Okay. I see. So does it feel scary when you start doing your own real creative stuff though? Like it seems like for a little while you were expressing other people's ideas through yourself, right? You were changing lyrics here and there a little bit, but like it must have been a pretty big jump once you get to college. You're doing the saxophone, you're doing guitar, and then you start really writing in earnest for yourself.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know, because I don't know if I had any, like, I didn't know what I was doing with it. I was just doing it because I kind of thought I needed to,
do what?
Oh, sorry, like writing my own songs.
Oh, why? Why did you feel you needed to?
That's a really good question. I don't know. That's a really good question, and one I hadn't thought about. Like, I think there was always kind of maybe it's just that creative energy that you want to, because like
it's like a compulsion. There's something, so like why not do it?
Like even though I said in high school I didn't play with the bands, I did have a guitar in my house, and I would sit in my basement bedroom and strum along, or like slowly learn how to finger pick or something.
Sure.
And I think that's pretty natural that like as you're learning an instrument, you start doing something, you're like, oh, this is kind of a cool little riff, like what would I well, this is my song.
Yes. Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I'm sure. And
Yep.
and I think there's like a sense of achievement with that. Like there's like there's a sense of achievement, and
Absolutely, it's like
when you
claiming
create something
new
on your own.
Yes, yes, it's like weirdly claiming new territory, or what you think is untouched territory, and realistically, it's probably been well tread over time. The older you get, the more you see. You're just all your influences synthesized through whatever you're going through. But yeah, and it's only all 12 notes and all those things people
Of course,
say. But,
And
okay, that
I
makes
think
sense.
there's kind of like this need to be a part of the story of music, in a sense. Like, I would never have consciously said that at the time. Like, that's me looking back on it. But like, I think I loved reading about music. I loved reading about bands, and I loved reading about the history and like you kind of want to be part of that story.
I know what you mean.
As a creative person,
and it makes sense too, especially for you. I'm right there with you. I have had the exact same thought, and
cool.
Currently have the same thought, but in less of a grandiose way, where I'm like, this podcast will slightly document a certain time in Toronto music. That's like all I'm hoping for, as opposed to when you're a teenager and you're thinking about your place in the river of the history of music. You're like,
you still can think that, like, oh, maybe one day I'll be a big rock star.
Right,
like,
and it doesn't mean you were necessarily wrong at the time, right? It's just how you look at your dreams changes as you grow older and so on. But I want to know, actually, I'm a little bit stuck on the saxophone thing. I want to know how that might have, because saxophone is such a vocal, for lack of a better word, instrument. I'm curious how that impacted the way you sing, if at all. Or thought about melody.
I think melody is key. Like I think saxophone, because it's a melodic instrument, I think that helped me understand melody a little better, like subconsciously as well. Like I'm not a very technical thinker when it comes to writing.
I get it.
But I think it was easier for me to write melodies, I think, because I'd been a saxophone player and I'd done lots of reading and playing and listening to a lot of jazz and stuff in college, and which is another also adds another level of like genre, like, and including ideas from genres in my music,
depth of knowledge, like in depth of context or whatever you want to call it. And
then more artists to read about and try to and hope that you could be part of that story.
No, absolutely. I like that you're also really into music history and reading about it, like as a, not just as a fan, but like almost like in a cultural history way, because I was the exact same way, and currently am, but was especially. Like the fact that Wikipedia exists is the greatest thing in the world, because I'll just, you can spend hours on there, right, following different threads. I don't know how to articulate the question I want to ask about music history. Like, I want to know now, you kind of described what you thought in high school about being that part of it. How do you feel about it now?
I think now being a creative person is like is an important thing for me as a human being, and as for my sanity. Being creative is really important, and expression, and even like what it does to your body. We talk about singing, how singing opens your body up and makes you feel euphoric. That kind of thing, and I'm leaning more into the idea of creative endeavors with other people, like the idea of like how that builds your emotional, I don't know, your emotional level. I don't know. It's hard to really say, but like singing with other people does so much good to the body.
Right, it creates like some unarticulatable harmony or something. Yes.
Yeah, and there's always that weird thing when you start creating, you start releasing things that you want to keep. You feel like maybe you kind of have to keep doing it. And like there should be a progression.
That's interesting.
I'm kind of like thinking out loud a bit here. Like I'm
No,
trying
of
to
course,
articulate,
of course.
like this is my therapy session or something.
I know. I've heard that from a few people, so clearly I have a way of asking these questions.
I was thinking about, I took therapy with someone once, and we were talking about the Rockstar thing, and she was like, she said to me once, she was like, it's okay to like have wanted to be a rock star. There's nothing embarrassing about that. And that was really a helpful thing to hear. Like it's like, oh no, it's true. Because like at a certain point you start thinking like, what an embarrassing idea that like I'm going to be a rock star, or I'm like the whole, even the term rock star is so silly that
I think maybe only the term is the thing that is a little bit like you want to shake it off somehow. But the idea of being what that represents is not embarrassing, especially you're pursuing that is in a way that one of the mountaintops of what you are in the arena of pursuing. So it makes sense. But I think what you're sort of also saying, and or what your therapist said, and what you're also sort of conveying is your literally how you look at the landscape of your career and what you want from music changes, and it doesn't change from, oh, I didn't achieve that. It changes to, I no longer want to achieve that. I have these other main goals anyway.
That's true. Yeah, your goals are always changing, and it would actually be silly to try to be reaching the same goals at my age now that I was trying to reach at 25 or something.
Right, or at least for the same reasons, right? If that never changed, you would be like stuck in Arrested Development kind of. When did you have that
which I've seen happen?
Oh, certainly, yeah. When did you have that therapy session? How old were you when that was a breakthrough?
That one was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
I like that you brought this up though, because I think it is something that everybody maybe thinks about. Like the idea of rock star, I don't know if that's even existed since the early 2000s or the late 90s or something, right?
Like pop singer, or like like I think my nephews want to be YouTube stars.
Right. Like,
what's the chance?
Love them or hate them, but like Logan Paul or whatever is probably a rock star to them in the way we would think of it.
Yeah, exactly. And what's will YouTube even exist when they're 20, when they're in their 30s or 20s? Probably
maybe
not.
40 years from now, we'll all have this version of social media in our heads where literally our reality can be fixed to where we are a famous person or something like that. It's going to get to that,
true,
right?
Actually, I mean that's what kind of it is. I had a friend who once said when Facebook first started and we all kind of started getting Facebook, and he's like, it's really interesting. He's like, everyone kind of wants to feel special on Facebook, but and everyone is kind of special on Facebook.
Everyone is kind of online,
And he was like, but if everyone is special, then is anyone special?
Exactly. And
I think of that a lot.
Yes, absolutely. That's why the nature of celebrity has changed as a whole. Not even rock star, but just celebrity, right?
It's true.
So, yes, that's sort of continuing actually what I want to talk about. Like, the idea, too, of when you were imagining being a rock star, like, what... Being a rock star in what industry now? The industry is totally different. Right? Like,
totally.
It just doesn't seem like the same thing. It just doesn't seem like the same thing. So it's
not, yeah.
Right?
And I think like my actual wanting to be a rock star ended in my 20s,
Right.
There was and there was also like a switch of style of music. Like I started when I was writing original tunes in my 20s, it was a little more like indie rock. But then at some point, I realized that I would do better in more of a folk, acoustic scene. And then
what do you mean do better?
Do better, like make have more of a place there. Like I think, first of all, just on a technical side, I didn't own. I had an electric guitar. I never owned an amp.
Okay.
and I'm afraid of technology. So even setting up this system with the microphone and a little little thing, that's like.
Are you happily a Luddite, as they say? You're kind of happy.
I don't know if it's happily.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just I kind of give up on it pretty quick. So with pedals, for example. Well, I think it's more like an audio thing because it's so subjective how something sounds. In a sense, so if I have pedals and stuff and then I twist them one way one day and the other way another day, I'm not confident that I know which is better. If that makes sense.
I do know what you mean. I don't think it matters with pedals. I do think it matters with gear, where there's I guess a closer to objective, better sound quality or worse quality. Whereas pedal sound, if you want to make it, turn the knob any which way, why is that not up to you?
It's true. And I think it's just that there's like, here comes a
no worries.
ambulance there.
It's the music police. They heard us talking about misusing pedals.
Like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to like my acoustic guitar. I play it; it's gonna sound the same. Depending.
Interesting.
If I plug it in any house, any venue or whatever, it'll sound different depending on who the sound guy is.
Yes.
I know when I play it like this, it sounds like this.
Yes.
Right. And I've had different guitars over the years that change the sound a little bit, but at least I'm like sure what it's going to sound like. And when I add more things to that, it gets a little there's too many options maybe. And
analysis paralysis, as they say, right?
Yeah,
it's too much.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
I did not invent that, but it's a good one to have in the back pocket.
It's good. I've never heard that before, but that's kind of it. Yeah.
That's it, right? I'm curious. You said, because you've moved through a few different genres, right? You said like 70s style rock back in the day, then indie rock, now moved into folk. You explained why you moved from indie rock into folk, but not the prior section. What brought you into the indie rock? Was it just the nature of what the band songwriters were orienting themselves towards, and then you had to just fit into that?
I think it's more my listening habits. So when I got into high school, I was like strictly listening to, not strictly, but mostly listening to classic rock. I was like a classic rock nerd. And then indie rock stuff would come in. Radiohead was a big life changer for me. Radiohead changed my whole life in a lot of ways. Like hearing OK Computer for the first time was a life changer. Like definitely. I've told this story before, but I can tell you the moment I wanted to be a musician.
Please do.
And that was in Paranoid Android, when the band kicks in. The Do you remember? And they do the shot, and it stopped, and then hit again.
Oh,
and I remember
it's so
hearing
good.
that for the first time, being like, I want to do this. Like, which is funny because I don't do that.
Right.
But something about that, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is something I want to do. Like, and that maybe it just opened my eyes to the world, that like you can do these kind of things. And I don't know.
At the end of the day, they are just humans, just like you are. Theoretically, you should be able to do it.
Yeah. And then I moved to Toronto to go to school. I went to Humber College for music, and I like jazz. I listened to a lot of jazz. And we'd go out and see jazz artists and stuff. But also, like, Toronto in the 2000s was a perfect time for indie rock, as I'm sure you know. Like
the Broken Social Scene. Yes.
Yeah, you'd go see Broken Social Scene at, like, Lee's Palace, or, like, Hayden. I always loved Hayden, actually. I loved Hayden in high school. And, like, I could actually go see Hayden,
Yeah.
And so that, and I started playing in other bands that were more indie rock. So that ended up becoming my focus for a few years. Yeah.
Any interesting stories from being around Toronto at that time and seeing some stuff?
No.
No. Or actually, I was a little bit curious when you said jazz. Actually, why not shout out a few jazz spots that you like going to if they're still around?
Well, still around. The Rex is a classic, and that place has been forever. And we used to go there and see some great nights of music. A lot of the places are gone. Like, we'd go to the Montreal Bistro, which is gone, and Top of the Senator, which is now the same place, has jazz now. A bistro something, I can't remember what it's called exactly.
Right, but it's changed.
It used to be in this Top of the Senator. And I think we'd go see a lot of local jazz. So there's not like a lot of like really, like I saw this guy here, but it was like the exciting nights we'd go see. They'd do a John Coltrane night at the Rex once a year, and it was Pat LaBarbera and Kirk McDonald, who are two of the best tenor players in Toronto. And that night was like electric. That was like, you'd go and like it'd all be like jazz kids like us sitting there watching, and we just like eyes wide open, like, what are they doing?
Like that famous photograph of those kids listening to it's John Coltrane or it's Miles Davis, but they're like literally in ecstasy looking, and they're like 13 maybe at the front of the stage.
That would have been us.
In
our like early 20s.
That sounds great. That sounds like a good time.
Stuff. Yeah, it was great.
let's get into your because that's maybe a way into the first main question, which is what's the best gig you've played for you?
Yeah, this is interesting because like I'm sure like a lot of people who go on your show they like try to like plot out what the answer to these questions are because I've listened to your show a few times. Like I really like it. I love the concept, and you've had a few guests who are friends of mine and a few guests who are like I respect, like someone like Dave Bedini. I really enjoyed that
for sure. That was a great one.
So I was like, I'm gonna write out a bunch of things, and I like you should see my phone app. It's like best gig, worst gig, and there's nothing
amazing
under any of them because
really?
I don't know how to answer this. But like I was thinking about best gigs, and I think it had a lot to do with where I was, or like these. Usually, it's like the context that really makes it a great gig for me. So I think about like the first gig I played in Iceland was super amazing because I went to Iceland once in like 2013, or even earlier. I went to Iceland with my partner at the time, and I fell in love with the place. And then years later, I met a guy in Germany, and he said he had a festival, and this festival was like it's called Melodica, and they happen in a whole bunch of different cities. I think it started in Australia, and it's like kind of like the name is used in different cities. So this was in Cologne. He had this festival, and he was telling me, he was like, there's one in Cologne, Berlin. It started in Australia.
It's like a franchised out festival, kind of, weirdly. Interesting.
And he said there was one in Reykjavik, and I was like, who books that? Like, I got to get back to Iceland. And it was this guy named Svava Knuta, who's a really, really great songwriter who lives in Iceland. And I sent them an email, and he said, "Sure, you're on." And so I got to go by myself.
It's like that Icelandic friendliness. Sure, you're on. Yeah,
it was like that too, because like, it was like, I don't know, it wasn't very formal. And it wasn't like it was like months and months in advance. It was just like, come, we're doing it this time, so come on in. And it was amazing. And it was like a weekend thing. And the first night, like I had merch there, and I didn't bring much merch. And I sold out of merch the first night, and I wasn't playing.
Damn,
like,
what?
It was like, I was like, what is going on here?
What? Out of curiosity, what was the merch? What you got? T-shirts, albums,
records, albums. Cool. It was albums and CDs, records and CDs.
Cool.
And I didn't bring very much at all because I was like, who's going to buy this,
Right. Wow, that's crazy, though. That's awesome.
Before the show even happened. And then the show was really great. And then I think it was like the context of being there was in this beautiful place. And like with these people who I didn't know anybody. And to share music with people from different countries is like...
Who are open to it.
Things.
Yeah. The only thing that I hear about Iceland... The only negative I hear about Iceland is that it's expensive.
Yes, it is.
But other than that, it's pretty great.
Yeah, and it's nice. I've played there a few times, and when I've played there, I've stayed at people's houses, so I don't have to worry about that fee, thankfully.
Okay.
But, food's pricey, but it's a beautiful place. And
for sure.
So that one's a big one. Another thing I was thinking about, because I just listened to that Rio Statics episode, I played, they used to do the Stomping Tom Connor tribute at the Horseshoe. And a mutual friend who was booking it put me on the bill, and I got to play a song. And it's the only time I've ever played at the Horseshoe, and I think it's like the perfect reason to play the Horseshoe is I got to play a Stompin' Tom Connor with my backing band as the Rio Statics.
Yeah, that's...
And Mary Margaret O'Hara singing backgrounds. It was like...
That's pretty cool.
I was just like, where am I? Who am I? What is happening? Like,
who am I?
Mary Margaret O'Hara is like a legend, and the Rio Statics are legends. But Martin Tielli, his solo acoustic album, his first album, it was a life changer for me. It really changed my life. Like, it was like the guitar playing and his singing, like his melodies and the sound of his voice. It was life changing for me. So to be on stage with these people was just like I've peaked,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that sort of exemplifies something that I've noticed in the Canadian music scene and I guess the Toronto music scene. I was a little bit surprised at, like, as a kid, for me, watching much music and stuff, You see these people, they're older than you, they're in music videos, much music seems legitimate. Not that it isn't now as an adult, but very much as a teenager. It was like, and then you realize as soon as you get into the Toronto music scene that actually there's only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation usually between you and those people. And so those amazing things of meeting your Canadian heroes can actually happen. And those nights, like you described, can wind up happening, which is, that's a great thing about Toronto.
It's true. Yeah.
Not that it doesn't exist in other cities, but just there is a concentration of artists in Toronto where it's most likely to happen.
Yeah, and that's I guess a big Canadian thing because of Much Music and stuff. We were familiar with these bands.
Yes.
And a lot of them were out of Toronto, and a lot of them still live here. Like,
yeah.
You know, and sometimes you meet them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you meet them, you wish you didn't meet them, and sometimes you meet them and you have a great time. You know, it's like.
I'm not going to ask you to name names.
No, actually, I was gonna. As I said, I'm like, I'm not gonna say who, but like,
no. I'm not going to ask you to name names, but I would love to know what the behavior was that what you were like. Oh, that's lame.
Well,
also, you can say no if you want, but.
Well, yeah, the story doesn't really make sense unless I tell the name.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'd be happy to tell you off mic.
Sure. But it was just suffice it to say, don't always meet your heroes, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly,
gotcha.
But that's a rare occurrence. Like
most people are kind.
Yeah, like they're just wonderful people. They're all musicians, and also like as a Canadian musician. Especially someone who is like maybe somewhat big in the 90s, 2000s, or that kind of wears off, and you're just kind of like doing your thing, and you're still playing hopefully, and you're suddenly playing maybe smaller venues than used to. And I think you don't have that. There's no reason to have an ego at that point. Right. And most of them don't. Yeah.
That does seem to happen, especially it's like the nature of the Canadian industry and its size. I think. That kind of can tend to happen, and just the nature of a lot of creative careers, frankly. It's just, but you're right. That's interesting. Okay, so those were the best. I want to hear the worst.
The worst.
Yes.
The worst shows. That this is a tough one because thankfully I don't have a lot of like really bad shows.
That's good.
And I think and I also think which makes it like a less interesting question to answer is that like a bad show is very much in your mind, with exception, like if someone's yelling at you from I've played lots of places where people talk through the set. Right. I mean, that's inevitable. That's going to happen. I've played a lot of empty rooms, which is always a little sad. But that being said, you can play an empty room sometimes and have a great time. So it's really a mental
like attitude.
State.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I find like the gigs I think of as worse are usually because I wasn't there mentally. Like, there was a gig I played in Germany where it was like a cafe, and it was a pretty good sized cafe, and it was packed, absolutely packed. And apparently it's like this on weekends. It just gets packed even if they don't know the songwriter. Yeah. But I couldn't get a reaction out of them. Like, I'm not the greatest at banter, but usually I can get if I get like even like a snicker or something.
Right, titters here and there, yes.
I'm like happy. But it was the most stone-faced crowd I've ever seen. And I didn't know what to, I just like didn't know what to do. And then I start running through the songs to get them over with and early. And then I feel like it was a wasted night. And then a weird sort of end of that, like a year or two later, I remember talking to another artist in Germany, and I mentioned that place, and he said the same thing to me. He's like, did you find that they were like a very like non-committal audience? And I was like, yes, I did.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, I don't know why. They're just this audience which is very...
Maybe that is the nature of a place where people go regardless of the musician.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And also, not to trash on German people are great, but isn't one of those things about, like a stereotype about Germans is they're very just like, yes, that was funny, thank you.
It's true. Yeah. It's very true. And actually that's the first time I went to play shows in Germany. I had another friend say something like that to me. He was like, hey, listen, you're going to have a great time. Just know they're not very responsive in general. Right. They'll watch the show. They'll clap at the end of every song, but don't think that they're, being mean to you or something. That's just how they act. But even still, I think there's like, it was like a song or two I'd play where like I would actually get a reaction, like a lyrics were maybe funny or something, and I would get a reaction, and so maybe I got kind of a bit of a ego about it. And I play that song and there's no reaction. And I'm like, what do I got? I got nothing else.
Yes. I gotcha. And also, just to backpedal about the German thing, every country has their own things. I was just speaking to somebody here who literally said that it was talking about the differences between American and Canadian audiences, and it's like the Canadians are a little more, they'll appreciate it just as much as Americans, but they might stand there. And it's like, that's true. I'm guilty of that.
They used to say that about Toronto, right? Like it was like in the hip hop community, they used to call it the screw face capital of Canada.
Oh, really? I haven't heard that.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it might be an old phrase, but like, it just stuck with me. Like the idea that people are just kind of like at the back, like,
I can definitely imagine that. Yeah. Well, that screw face has bled into folk and every other scene.
And so, I mean, I think that's just to say that, like, like what you said, I did know this about the audience.
Yes.
But I got in my head, I think is what happened.
Totally.
And I thought, like, they're just putting up with me.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta get out of here,
that's the worst feeling. Even if you're right, even if you ask someone later and you're right, that's not the good attitude to continue with on the stage.
It's not.
Totally.
It's not. And it's hard to get rid of it. As soon as you start...
it's contagious within yourself. It just, like, spreads. Oh, it's tough. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Okay, well, then let's get back into sunnier territory. What do you think about best song that you've released?
I was having this conversation actually with my partner this morning because I mentioned that I was doing this, and she had some ideas of songs that she thinks are really great, and I think they're good ideas. But there's a song called "In Conversation" that from my album William that is people really like it. People are really drawn to it, and I like playing it because it's picked. But the thing that's interesting with me with that song is that, like, I always think, like, I could never write a song like this again. Like,
interesting. Why is that?
Kind of like,
why do you know that?
It's very much like it feels like a country folk song in a very genre specific way. I think that I don't know. I don't really write that way even then. Like I think.
So it's an outlier, but in a good way.
It feels like an outlier, and there's like some imagery in the lyrics that I rarely do.
Can you recall what headspace you were in when you were writing that?
Yeah, it was like that was one of the rare times when, like, I actually wrote with an idea of what I was writing about.
Oh.
So that's interesting. Actually,
that is interesting.
Since we were just talking about that, like, I had a friend of mine there's this really tiny festival in Aurelia called the Arts for Peace Festival, and it's kind of a hippie festival. Like, they dance around the maypole and stuff.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
A friend of mine was helping do it, and she asked me to play, and then she's like, "You should write a song for it. Like, write a song of peace." About peace. And I thought, like, I can't do that, so I kind of wrote this song instead, which is like more about like having like gray areas, like having like not being black and white, not like in my head, not being able to find a black and white opinion on some things, and being conflicted with the idea of this kind of black and white narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, myself within myself. Yeah,
you were struggling with. You were writing about struggling with being able to get out of the nuanced gray area and find something you felt black and white about.
A bit of that.
Interesting.
A bit of that, and like a bit of like, yeah. And I think that's.
I feel like a lot of people feel like they try and strive for the other way. They want to get more nuanced. So that's interesting that you felt, I guess. How did you? This is very therapy. How did you feel to the extent that, like, why was that something you were trying to escape as opposed to stay within?
Oh, and I don't know if it was I was trying to escape. It was more that, like,
I dramatized it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, but it's more like it's not in me to, or wasn't in me to, like, write a song that's like very cut and dry, very black and white.
Yes.
And so the song ends up being about my struggle to do something like that and how it's not possible.
It's kind of a meta song.
Yeah, and
cool.
So it's a song. It's interesting because I don't know if I would say it's my exact favorite song. Like, there's some lyric stuff that I'm not exactly keen on now. Sure. So that makes it a little harder to pick it. But there's things
if you
I really
average
like
everything out, it's kind of
yeah. And then there's on the new album there's a song called My Key Light, Quiet Company, which I didn't think much of exactly when I wrote it, but now I'm like really excited about the song because it was
why now?
Well, I think because I started playing it in front of people, I think that was a big thing.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
so the song I had written as kind of like a power pop song originally, and we recorded a version of it, and it wasn't working like for the album, and me and my producer were like, this song's not working. What do we do with it? You know, and so I took it home and I ended up rewriting it using the same lyrics as a slow, kind of reflective song. And I sent him a message, and I was like, Rob, I figured it out. I figured the song out. And he's like, I figured the song out too. And he was like, so he had like edited it in a way that like made the song so much better. And I had rewritten it, and I was like, let's just put both versions on the album. And we did, and I think it works. And again, there's that that kind of tape loop thing, where the song comes back later in a different way. And I started playing it, and my friend Laura Spink sings on it with me on the recording, and we sing live a lot. And it's just great. I love singing with her, and I think the song is like, I think it's a good song lyrically. Like I think it's like, there's kind of a like balance. I find really interesting songs where something can be like funny and kind of emotional at the same time, like kind of like almost like a bittersweet thing.
Yes.
Which is tough because sometimes it can go too far one way or the other.
Yes.
And I think the song mostly captures that balance really well.
Yeah, it's a tightrope.
And it's interesting because I think in the power pop version, there's a bridge that I cut out of the the slow version. And I think that bridge would have pushed it too far into the funny, silly way. So when I pulled it out, anyways.
I want to ask about the slow version. Just in terms of actual physically, like practically playing it. I know I'm someone who, because I've had that idea sometimes where I go, oh, this song might be better if I slow the tempo down or change the time signature or whatever. I physically have a tough time getting out of the pocket that it was originally in. Like I find myself being tugged back to that initial BPM. How are you able? I guess I'm just being like, how the fuck did you do it? Yeah. How do you have the self-control?
I think what did it again, like it all comes down to the guitar for me. So there was a riff in it. And in the power pop version, it's kind of like a faster riff. It's like a da 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 da, kind of like and I play it like more like a riff, like a guitar riff.
Yep.
And I think when I was trying to figure something on the acoustic, and it's on an E, and I realized I could play the riff off an open string like in a slower way. And once I figured that out, I still had the melody, because the melody follows the riff. I still had the melody, and then I could just kind of work from there. And then and then a friend of mine, just like on a technical thing, a friend of mine had written a song where he put a capo on the fret, like fourth fret, I think, and did on all the strings except for the low E string. So the low E could just bring out that low
as
sound.
the E, yes.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I'll try that, and I put it on, and then I could do that riff in a different way and get that low E. And I think that really was give me something I really wanted to explore. And I had the lyrics there anyways, so I could just like, okay, well, transfer it that way.
Writing songs after that, is that something that you've gone back to, even just to stretch what the song could be, even if you don't end up doing that again, even if you don't end up making this next one slower, it still helps you figure things out?
Yeah, and that's a pretty new thing, to like go back to older songs, you mean?
No, sorry. What I mean is, did the fact that you wrote that as a slow version as well, that was sort of a way through figuring out that song. So as you then write newer songs and go forth in your creative pursuits, does that impact the way you approach songs now, where in the back of your mind you're like, well, it could be slower, could be faster, you're like going there sooner?
Probably not.
Okay.
I think it would definitely be in my arsenal if I had a song that wasn't working, that I knew wasn't working.
Gotcha.
That it could be like, well, this has worked before if I just did this, if I decide to take it and change the genre of it or something, maybe that will help. And that's something maybe I didn't think about as much before. I was probably more quick to drop a song than I am now.
Why have you become less cutthroat about that?
I think I've just become less precious about my songwriting, in a sense. Like I'm still a very slow songwriter.
Right.
But like I've also gone back to old songs that I didn't like and rewrote them, which I'd never done before. I think it's all part of the editing process. Like when I kind of start my career, this career as Shawn Clarke with this album William that came out in 2010, and then I was writing songs, and they didn't change. You know, it was like I wrote the song, here are the lyrics, that's it. And then slowly between albums, I started figuring out ways of actually doing this thing called editing, which was...
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure at first either, but
it's pronounced editing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll send you a definition after the show.
Thanks.
But that really, it actually ended up becoming fun for me. So that on the new album, I was like writing out the song, and like if I didn't like a line, I would just start writing the line and writing alternatives, and like just not being precious about each line. Like, okay, well, this line works, this line works, this line, and then they'll be like, well, that line doesn't work, and crossing it out, and that might not sound like a revelation to a lot of writers, but to me, it felt like a revelation that, like, I can actually edit the songs and do what I want. And there's also this thing of like, and I think the pandemic really helped with this mindset where it's like, I don't know if I can swear. I was like, who the fuck cares? You know, like,
totally.
Who cares?
Totally.
You know, like, especially now, it's like you feel like no one's listening. So like, if I want to like rewrite a song from 2010 that I liked, but I didn't like these words, I'm just gonna do it. And
what I was gonna say about that is like, all bets are off on what you can do with your music career right now. All bets are off. Like even Taylor Swift had a reason for it, but she re-recorded a bunch of her music as if that's going to spawn people doing different versions of their singles. Like my point is, you can be Taylor Swift or you can be us. There's no real rules to it, you know.
Yeah.
So why not do that? Which brings us to the last question. So what do you think is your worst song?
Worst song.
Yes.
Yeah, and this was a tough one too, because I didn't want to go back to like my first couple of recordings, which you can't even hear now, because there are some songs on those that I'm like embarrassed by. I'm
sure,
but they're not my professional songs. They're not songs that you could listen to. And even some of the songs I recorded just under Shawn Clarke, like early on, I still feel like they're not part of my career exactly. They're almost like stepping stones. So that made it a little harder. I don't know why I created a box for myself, but so I started thinking about songs that like I don't play.
Yes,
and like
right.
why that might be the case. And you know, the album William, it was like had an anniversary last year, so I did a show where I played a bunch of the songs from them, but there's one song I didn't play, which is called Ballad of a Boorish Man. And I think maybe I'd pick that one because it's, I think lyrically, you know, it's very obvious what I was trying to do, but like I said, I wasn't editing at the time, and I think I could have written it a lot better.
I see.
And said a lot, and also said what I wanted to say in less of a broad way. You know,
but it isn't one that you would rewrite.
I don't think so.
It's a lost cause.
I mean, I could sit with it and try.
Yeah.
I just hadn't thought about doing that much. And also, I think the way it's played. So the song that I rewrote, which is actually off that album, which is called Forest City, I like playing it. Like, I really like, it's just like a strummed guitar.
You wanted to save it.
Yeah, I wanted to save it. And I think the melody's nice. And whereas this one, it's like I tried playing it, like, and it's recorded a step down, which I have so many tunings. When I play live, I don't want one more, so I'm not going to tune the whole guitar down. And when I try to play it in standard, the melody's a little hard, a little weird to hit. So there's just all these kind of little problems with the song that I just can't put together in a way that I think I want to play it anymore.
Well, that's usually a signifier, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think like it's an awful song
or
anything. I just think it's like not. It's just not. I just gotta let it go, I think.
No, that's very mature. That's wise. Is there anything? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, it's interesting. Like, I've listened to maybe 4 or 5 episodes of the show, and like, how do you find people answer that question generally?
I've heard it a bunch of different ways. Some people just go the objective route and say this has got the least amount of streams across these things, which I appreciate taking that way. And then some people, I would say, they come on and they haven't yet decided, And so we kind of work through it together. And one of the ways that I do it is, what song do you never play? Because sometimes that's a way to tell what you feel least connected to.
Yeah.
But also sometimes the answer is mental state. And it's just like, I associate that song with a time in my life where it doesn't mean the song is bad, but what it means to me is soured, and therefore it's my worst song for me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It comes in all shapes and forms, this answer.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why that's why it makes for a good
I think so.
podcast question.
I hope so. Is there anything you want to promote before we get to the end?
No,
I mean, in addition to the album you're promoting?
It would be great if people went back and listened to any of my albums. I think that's really nice. That would be lovely.
For sure.
Bandcamp's always great, but if you're streaming, stream it.
Awesome.
I am an albums guy, and I feel like maybe something I don't like try to like inject into people as much as like it would be cool if people sat down with the albums. Like I feel like
start to finish.
I really like care about how an album moves from start to finish. And I don't know. But listen,
I appreciate that.
However you like. I'm just like, as a songwriter, that would be great.
No, it makes sense. It's a little, I don't know. I agree with you completely.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's a little bit like if an author was telling you about the collection of short stories they wrote, they put those short stories in a certain way.
Yeah.
But people were like, "Fuck you, author! I'm going to start with the last one, then I'm going to go to the second one." Right? It would get a certain vibe across, and you'd get some of the substance, but not in the way that the intention was.
Yeah.
So it's good that you're saying. It's good that you're saying
Yeah.
it. That's a PSA to everybody. Be album people.
Yeah, albums are great. I love albums. I mean, I got some records over here that are like, that's part of my collection, and it's just like. It's great. So just listen, please.
Yeah. Listen, please.
I will have some shows coming up in the late summer, fall,
cool.
Nothing's really solidified yet. So
okay,
so I
no
guess
worries.
Keep checking back.
Yeah, well, Shawn. Okay, well, if you've heard the podcast, so I end it by asking you to state your name and restate the worst song choice. So take it away, my friend.
My name is Shawn William Clarke, and possibly the worst song that I've written is called "Ballad of a Boorish Man."
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.